friends, I'm back today with my October reading wrap up. I will admit, I've been struggling with reading. I wouldn't say I've been slumpy, I've just been sad I've been having some focus issues. And when I have focus issues, it's really hard for me to stay on track with what I'm reading. I thought October was going to be much better, but then October was just a bit busier than I planned because I went to Comic-Con and I had a bunch of other events that I went to, and it was just sort of the same. And I was trying to read outside my comfort zone so much, challenge myself, read some horror, read some other types of things, and it just didn't work out. So I think I'm just going to read what I want to read and not try to like overextend myself. Because that was half the problem, I think, and I'm just going to pick up books that I want to read. But I have also been like listening and reading at the same exact time, and I've been sort of just, I DNF'd, like I put down a lot of books this month, so that's why I have a smaller amount, and I might go back to them, I might not, so they're not on this list, but let's get into it. So the first book that I finished reading in the month of October was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sengnu Mandana. I really like this book. I gave this book 5 stars. I do have a lot of 5-star reads this month just because the books that I loved, I really, really loved. And the books that I didn't love, I sort of struggled with. But this was always sort of pitched to me as the fall version of House on the Cerulean Sea. I would agree with that. I really love the diversity elements. I love books about found family, and this is what this book screamed to me. But you basically follow this main character named Micah, and she is a witch. But witches in this world are like very isolated beings, so when she's tasked to kind of go to this mansion and work with these 3 young witches, she sort of takes on the task. And then she meets a main character with a librarian named Jamie, and they need her to train these witches so their powers aren't dangerous. And that is where the story starts. It was a really fun found family story, a lot of elements that I liked. It just gave me House on the Cerulean Sea vibe. It also just gave me a lot of found family vibes, and also a very, very sweet like parental relationship and a lot of fun side characters. I liked it. I gave it 5 stars. Definitely a really fun early fall read that just put a smile on my face and felt like I was being hugged by these characters. So that was a delight. This was a 5-star read and definitely witchy. I was looking for a lot of witchy books this month and I didn't always find them, but this one I did. So I was happy about that. The next book that I picked up was an audiobook, and that is Witches Get Stitches by Juliet Cross. This is the 3rd full-length novel in the Stay a Spell series. Here is a photo, so let's get into it. So this is the 3rd book in this series, and I will admit, I like these books. They're definitely not my like absolute favorite. They are very, very steamy, and I sometimes struggle with that just because I feel like I need a little bit more plot in my story. So this book I liked. I didn't love it. I think the hero was a little bit alpha for me, and the story was a bit steamier than I like, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. I like seeing the sisters again. I like that it sort of progressed the story forward, so like you kind of got to see the other main characters as well, but then it sort of set up, you know, future books as well. I liked it. It was fun. It was steamy. It was paranormal. It was witches. This is again another witchy read, which I was looking for for fall. That's like my favorite trope to read about witchy stories, and this one definitely did that for me, which it checked my box. But yeah, it was fun. I gave it like 3.5 stars. I do want to read the other ones, but it's just not like a new favorite series for me. Again, I'm not the big steam girl, but it was a fun read and I enjoyed it. So the next book that I picked up was my Comic-Con weekend book, which just means my life was a bit crazy. I will say that. It was a bit crazy that week, and that sort of started my focus issues. But I picked up How to Survive Your Own Murder by Daniela Valente, which is a pseudonym for the person that wrote The Mercilesses, and that was like a trilogy. This one I enjoyed. I don't think it was my favorite book ever, but the ending was super surprising and I enjoyed it. But let's take a sneak at this really, really cute cover. Not cute, but like unique cover. I really, really like it. Photo. Please, editing Laura. And this book has a really, really interesting premise. So you basically follow this character set like a year in the past, and she and her sister are at a Halloween party, and the younger sister does not want to go in the haunted house. Her older sister goes by herself, and when that happens, her older sister is killed by a serial killer in the corn maze. And then you flash forward, and then her sister, her younger sister, is like the only witness to this crime. And then you flash forward a year to their trial, and she is like the only witness to this crime, and you follow the trial where they're trying to convict this man. But through some series of really odd events, she gets sucked back in time to the past to try to stop her sister's murder, and things go from there. It is a wild ride. It is a slasher story. I always say I struggle with slasher stories because I don't really feel that connected to like any of the characters, but and that's still true. Like, I don't think it's like my favorite type of story to read. There was a lot of grief elements in the story. It was very, very twisty, turny, and it was hard to predict like where the story was going. But the ending blew my mind so much so that I had to bump it up a star. So I thought that the ending was really shocking and really surprising. And I'm hoping we're gonna get a book 2 because like we left off in like such like a bad spot, and I was like, oh my god, I really hope we get a book 2. But it was very twisty turny, very, very capturing, very, very like fun and very, very engaging. I don't love slashers, but this is probably my favorite slasher book I've read in recent years, so take that for what it's worth. But yeah, so I gave this book 4 stars. I really hope we get a sequel, but we will see. And then I picked up a book that I got from Comic-Con. So I picked up Nightbirds by K.J. Armstrong, and this was a book that comes out in 2023, but I've been following Amy Kaufman and K.J. Armstrong's podcast where they sort of talk about their newer release, and she really talked this book up to me, so I was very, very eagerly anticipating it, and I tapped the crap out of it, so I loved it. I really thought it was a solid read. It had a lot of elements. It had 1920s society, girls with magical powers, political corruption, drama, intrigue, and more. But you basically follow these 3 nightbirds who can gift magic to people, and as the story goes on, they start to uncover what that means and what their lives are like. It was really interesting. 3 very different main characters with 3 very different life experiences and 3 very different ways to look at the world. The cast is really, really big. I will say this is an arc, so I'm being a little bit generous with my rating because I feel like some of the parts were a bit clunky. I am going to reread it in 2023 and just sort of do a polish read and see how I really feel. But right now, this was a 5-star read for me. It definitely wasn't witchy, but it had magic girl vibes, which was perfect for the season. So yeah, definitely really liked it. Really hope you will check it out in 2023, and I'm definitely going to reread it for sure. And then this is when my focus issue started, because coming back from Comic-Con is always a bit stressful. This book took me like a week to read, and that is really where everything started. So let's get into the second half of this vlog, or this video. So the next book I picked up was Wild is the Witch by Rachel Griffin. This is the second book that this author wrote. It is a contemporary fantasy standalone. This is Enemies to More, and I have to say I really like this book. Enemies to More is not my favorite trope, especially in YA, but I really like this. So you basically follow this main character named Iris, and she sort of is starting over with her mom in a small coastal town. She runs like an animal sanctuary after her best friend used magic to sort of turn her significant other into a mage, and that went horribly wrong, and her best friend was, went to jail. Her boyfriend died, and she was seen as like a witch in her little town, and that's not good. So she sort of went to this coastal town to sort of run an animal sanctuary with her mom. They have elemental magic. She specifically has animal magic, and she winds up working with a young boy named Pike, who is adamant that witches are evil. And something happens, and she basically sends a curse at Pike, and they have to go on an adventure to save Pike from this curse. And it is a wild ride, very, very steamy, very upper YA. I've been reading a lot of like steamy YAs, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I did really, really like it. Like, I enjoyed it. I think it had a nice balance of steam or like romance and plot. I think that they had a lot of interesting quote moments, so I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars, and I'm really excited to read more books by this author in the future, and it's definitely a new fave. The next book that I picked up was an audiobook, and that is Up All Night with a Good Duke. And this is a Regency romance that I've been dying to read, so let's get into it, and here is a photo. This was a very, very fun read. I will say that. It was a really, really fun one. This is a Regency romance where our main character really is determined to start a school, but she sort of gets kicked out of that. She sort of leaves that job because she has to help her sister and her best friend with their season. But little does everyone know she's a gothic romance writer, and she sort of gets caught up with this man whose daughter, he's a single dad, reads her romance novels, and I really liked it. It was a really, really fun listen. Very gothic, very, very like quick, very, very steamy, very, very romance. It's been a bit since I read a historical romance, and I really did like this one a lot, so that is why it is, you know, I picked up and finished it. I got a lot of recs for this to read it from Peace Love Books and a bunch of other people, so I was really, really happy, and I want to read book 2 in the series soon. That is the plan. We will see when I get around to it, but I gave this book 4 stars. I got myself a little bit out of order, but during Comic-Con weekend, when I was like running around like a crazy person, I did read The Agathas by Kathleen Gosson and Liz Lawson, and this was like an Agatha Christie sort of retelling where these 2 girls who used to be friends sort of team up to solve a murder of one of their ex-boyfriends, and things go from there. This was a fun read. It kind of gave me like Gone Girl vibes as well, because one of the girls sort of ran away in the past. It was a fun, devouring read. I felt like it was a quick read, especially because I was reading it over Comic-Con weekend, and pretty much nothing holds my focus over Comic-Con weekend. But it was a murder mystery. I liked it. It also talked about some harder topics as well, and I liked it. I gave it, you know, 3.5 stars, and I will definitely pick up book 2 when it comes out in the future because I was intrigued enough. And if you liked, you know, How to Survive Your Own Murder or The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I would pick this up because I think you might like it. And for this book, I gave it 3.5 stars for review. This is where my reading sort of took a nosedive, I will admit. So I picked up Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young, and this is her adult debut. And this book was not witchy. I felt like it was more a small town mystery with some minor witch elements, but it was definitely not the focus of the read. And honestly, the story was a little bit forgettable to me. I will say that. Like, I felt like I was reading the Veronica Mars story but in a book, and it just didn't seem that memorable. I would have loved if they pushed into the witch elements a little bit, so I only gave this one 3 stars, and I just struggled with it. I liked it, I didn't love it, but it literally felt like I was reading Veronica Mars. Like, it was very reminiscent of that plot point. It was very, very familiar to me, so it didn't wow me, and I'm so sad because this edition is just so pretty. But it definitely did not read really adult. It just was there. It was sort of a book that I don't think was categorized in the right genre. I think it maybe should have been YA. I think I would have liked it a little bit more as a YA book, but the characters were really unlikable too, so it was hard to root for anyone as well. But I gave it 3 stars. It was interesting. It just wasn't my favorite, and it didn't have the witchy vibes that I was looking for. I read about 50 pages of Lords of Night by J.C. Cervantes, and I put it down. And then I picked up 1, 2, 3, 4, I Declare a Thumb War by Alyssa Harrison and Danielle Kurz. And this one was just fun. It was a really, really quick middle grade read about 4 girls that they wind up telling ghost stories every single Friday night, and the best ghost story wins. And it was fun. And then it's sort of set in a town where like a murderer, you know, has lived, and they have like, you know, a week of festivities basically honoring this guy, I guess you could say. And it was a fun read. It was quick. I liked all the main characters. Their voices were like not as unique as I would like it to be. I will say there were definitely some tongue twisters in here that I'm gonna steal for my students because I think that they were fun. But I gave it 3 stars. The only thing I would hope in future books is that the characters' voices get a little bit more unique. But I gave it 3 stars, and it counted as a middle grade horror book that I had to read for my game, so I was happy about it. But alas, it was an okay read. It was 3 stars. So keep that in mind. I think my students might like this one, so I might save it for them. So the next book I read is I was trying to read some horror, and I was really struggling. Again, horror is not my genre, and I was really struggling at the tail end of this month to find anything that I wanted to read. So I read like 50 pages of a bunch of different things. I DNF'd them all. And then I just picked up Dead Flip by Sarah Farrison because my friend Jen said she thinks I might like it. And I did. It definitely gave me Stranger Things vibes. So it's set, half of the book is set in like the 80s and half of the book is set in the 90s. But you basically follow these 3 men friends, Corey, Maze, and Sam, and they're inseparable growing up. And then on Halloween, in, you know, I think it's like 80, 87, which is the year that I was born. Sam goes missing on a Halloween, and then it flashes forward 6 years, I think, to 1983, and Sam returns, but he is the same age that he was when he vanished, and they don't know what's happening. And it was a fun read. It definitely gave me Stranger Things vibes, I will admit that, but I like Stranger Things. It wasn't as scary as Stranger Things is, and it was a fun, quick read. It definitely had a lot of elements where, like, they were dealing with identity and they were dealing with their romance lives. It was just a very, very compelling, quick read. It didn't wow me. I gave it 3 stars for a review, but it was fun enough and solid enough for me to keep reading it. I didn't DNF it. It was a fun read. It was a quick read, but it didn't, like, knock my socks off. It did give me Stranger Things vibes, so if you're looking for something to sort of quench your thirst while we wait, like, 3 years for Stranger Things Season 5, I would pick this up because it was fun. I enjoyed it, but it didn't wow me, and I gave this 3 stars for a review. And then the last audiobook I read in the month of October was Killers of a Certain Age by Diana Rayburn. This is her newest standalone for the moment. But this is like, has like an interesting premise, I will say that. But it basically follow these 4 people that worked for like the FBI or like, you know, like MI6 or something. It's just called, what is it called? It's called, they worked for the museum, an elite spy organization. And when they're retiring, they go on this cruise, but they realize that the cruise is to take them out and they have to go on one final mission to clear their names. And it was fun. I think I really liked the audiobook a little bit more than the physical book, so I started reading it and then I picked up the audio. I do like to read a lot of Diana Rayburn's through audio just because they're very, very quick and fun. I gave it 3 stars. I think I still prefer her Veronica Speedwell series, but it was a fun read and I gave it 3 stars. And I really want to read more by this author, especially her backlist. And then the other things I read Lumberjackula by Matt Haggerty and Sam Owen. This is just a really, really cute graphic novel that I picked up at Comic-Con, and it's about this young lumberjackula that has to decide where he wants to go to school to be a full-time Dracula or be a lumberjack, and he sort of decides he has a passion for dancing and he has to make a big decision about that. It was cute. I think the art style just put a smile on my face, and I gave this one 4 stars for a review. It was very, very fun, and I might pass this on to my students as well. And then the last thing that I read, because of the boss battle, I had to read the smallest thing on my TBR, and I picked up Stanley's Ghost by Storm Kids, and this is another really, really quick comic, and it's just follows these 3 woodland creatures that follows them after their fruit goes missing and they have to figure out what's happening. It was really, really fun. Again, sort of like Lumberjackula. It was a very, very quick read. I gave this one 3 stars for review. And yeah, that is my October reading wrap up. I'm happy that it's done. I have high hopes for November. But yeah, let me know what are some books that you read. My highlights, I think, are definitely these 3. For sure. Wild as the Witch, Nightbirds, and The Six Secret Society of Irregular Witchers. Everything else just did not wow me. That's where we are. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon for my next video. Bye, friends.